we often like to start the conversation honoring the wonderful and great leader, Grace Lee Boggs, who was a visionary who passed a few years ago out of Detroit, who in really rooting us in a core understanding of who we are and what time we're live on, she would ask us, what time is it in the clock of the world? And there are obviously many ways to answer this question, but one shorthand is to frame it as we happen to be alive at a moment where the defense of home, the reclaiming of home, the returning of into a right relationship with home is the core political struggle of our times, especially in a moment where hyper-individualism has brought on, this new wave of fascism that we're all contending with, and rooting ourselves in an understanding of how life actually works on our planet, and that life is rooted in relationship. There's no individual that lives in a vacuum. And understanding that the web of relationships is, again, if we look at how life works, is so symbiotic, really informs how we proceed with our politic. And you'll see the prefix here, eco, which comes from the Greek oikos, which literally means home. So the etymology of a word like ecosystem is rooted in the word home. And then we find it so useful to appreciate, okay, if it's about reclaiming and defending and reconnecting with home, knowledge, proper knowledge of our home is central to the political equation. And my educated guess is that most of us at the summit who've been indoctrinated by the US conventional educational system, we were made functionally illiterate about home by design. Like, we actually don't know, what is our watershed? What is our food shed? What is our energy shed? Such crucial information. And as Zephyr was so correctly pointing out, like, this kind of information was central to how peoples on this land who are rooted in this land relate to home. But many of us have been disconnected from that. So that reclaiming of knowledge of home is central to our politics. And then it's just useful to realize, oh, okay, so if we're talking about economy, economy literally means management of home. Economy does not mean GDP or financial markets or stocks. It's actually just about how we organize the relationships at home. It's ideally to take care of place and each other. Point being, the management of home can be good or bad. It can be about turning land, life, labor into property for few, or it can be about returning land, life, and labor into a balanced web of stable relationships. Said another way, all economic activity has ecological consequences. It can be good, it can be bad. And one way to think about the dominant economy is its globalized mismanagement of home. So our participation in the reclaiming of right relationship with home, of proper management of home across 1,000 localities, is the struggle of the day. And that's why, amongst other reasons, I'm so inspired and excited to be with you. Because, there are many ways to frame what our work is about. But Dr. Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public. So that's one way of thinking about why we're here together today. So with that said, I'm going to put up a visual. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on it because I know you all are already rooted in this, but just to remind us that, so if we talk about managing home, if we talk about an economy, there are 5 pillars, we can call them, that are central to any economy. A functional one, a dysfunctional one. You need stuff to build human settlement. Then we as humans, our special gift is our work. It's our creativity, our labor, all towards a purpose. And it's kind of enforced by a worldview and by a governance structure, right? And in that spirit, again, I won't review this a bunch, but the extractive economy, its core purpose is about the enclosure of wealth and power. And here it's worth noting, an economy isn't about what the designers of that economy say it is about. It's about what it actually does. The designers of the extractive economy can weave all sorts of, pseudoscience about what it's about, but what it does is where the rubber meets the road, right? So I'm not going to review, because I think this is the core of so much of our work as organizers, understanding the extractive economy. But if what we're trying to do is rebuild and reinvigorate local living, linked, loving economies, or in short form, regenerative economies, we all understand that if it's rooted in a worldview that's around sacredness and caring towards the well-being of all living beings. Then how we harvest life sources is a regenerative relationship. How we deploy our work is about consent and cooperation and care. And then governance is about collective self-determination. Sovereignty is at the center of any regenerative economy, right? So on to like the juicy part of this work. So I think we're here to talk for the next 2 days and to discuss and learn from each other around like, okay, so how do we get from here to there? And I just want to acknowledge the transition in so many ways is about navigating contradictions. So we're up against this very entrenched system with tremendous power leverages, and negotiating the day-to-day of our strategies is complicated. So I just really want to honor that we're all making very difficult collective decision-making all the time. And that said, the first, I think, core concept that I really want to invite us to root our conversation is that all of our work to achieve a just transition should be both visionary and oppositional at the same time. We need to be both stopping the bad that is literally killing our communities while we build the new. And the poetics we use for this is what you feed grows. Why is this important? Because so many of us have been spending the bulk of our adult lives, and some of us our childhoods, resisting, which is necessary. It's central to our work. But if all we do is fight what we don't want, we'll learn to love the fight and only have longing for our vision. And longing isn't good enough. And I know Rosalinda will give examples, and TraeAnna as well, of when we organize ourselves to apply our labor to meet our needs, to build the world we want, the people around us then can actually see and smell and taste the world as it should be. And we are inspired to a whole other level to fight for our dreams if they are real. So that's why this first premise is so central to a just transition. So then moving on, the second premise is built around the concept of it's the right thing to do. We have every right to do it. So if we understand that the purpose of an extractive economy is to enclose wealth and power, we have to challenge the rules that enforce enclosure, because rulers make the rules, right? So we need to make rules that break the rules. One way to think about it is we need to practice civil disobedience at the scale of governance. Or, another fancy way of saying this, we need to provoke a crisis of jurisdiction. They can tell us, oh, it's illegal to govern land communally. And we can, if we start doing it and say like, well, we're doing it, it doesn't matter if it's legal or not, it's moral and ethical. And we're actually going to now start codifying the law in our favor. We're doing what's right, if that's making sense. And I just want to root us in one quick example of this happening in real time, just to give expression to the dynamism that is playing out in so many places around the continent. So this person is Frank Bivot, and he's a treaty rights attorney for the White Earth First Nation in Minnesota. And he, representing many folks, is suing the state's Department of Natural Resources on behalf of tribal members, Line 3 protesters, and most interestingly, on behalf of Manumin, which is wild rice. What they are putting forth is a new paradigm, new in a U.S. dominant context, old by people rooted in place for thousands of years, putting forth a rights of Mother Earth paradigm, or some call it new economic rights. So in August of this year, an action was filed in the tribal court of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe in Minnesota. The White Earth Band of Ojibwe and several tribal members put it forth to stop the state of Minnesota from allowing the Enbridge Corporation to use 5 billion gallons of water for the construction of the oil pipeline known as Line 3. What's fascinating about this is the first case brought in a tribal court to enforce the rights of nature, and the first rights of nature case brought to enforce treaty guarantees. What preceded this is that the White Earth Band of Ojibwe in December 2018 adopted a rights of Manumin tribal law. What does that mean? They're basically saying wild rice is a living entity, and its rights in relationship to the peoples of this land and all the living beings supersedes any corporate rights. Its well-being matters first and foremost. And Frank and others have put forth a case saying, Line 3 Enbridge, their rights matter less than Manumin's rights. So this is fascinating. And my point here isn't to say, so our battle is in the courts. My point is to say that this is one of a multi-tiered strategy, very linked to the direct actions that have been happening at line 3, saying, let us create a whole new paradigm within the legal structure that we're operating in that puts forth the rights of all living beings. And this concept of the rights of Mother Earth is growing across our communities. So again, I just wanted to give you one example. So, and happy to talk about it more. So moving on to the third premise, which is, if we are not prepared to govern, we are not prepared to win. And you'll see this arrow, which is implying more often than not, the smaller we go in the scale, the stronger we have as leverage as frontline communities. And the farther up you go the chain of command, the more they're using their power over us. And we have so many examples of what it means to govern. Like the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense is an excellent example in our context of folks saying, this government not only doesn't represent us, it's killing us. Literally, it has a plan to destroy us. And the creation of 50 plus self-help programs is an expression of saying, we are going to govern ourselves in a dignified way. That's the way forth. We at Movement Generation also take tremendous inspiration from the landless workers movement in Brazil. A lot of our learning comes from examples like they. What do? They're a network. They have representation in every state in Brazil. And they literally identify idle land owned by big landowners, occupy that land, make it productive, and then use this to claim the right to contest the title and say, this land now belongs to the people because we're putting it to good use. And then have a whole governance structure. They build schools, they build all sorts of day-to-day governance on that land. So just, again, trying to illustrate what it means. And I think you'll have such dynamic examples in the state of Washington where this is playing out. But I mentioned the MST, the Black Panthers, because it's that network capacity to attack this behemoth that's trying to rule us over us while having a decentralized capacity to do it our way in each place, which is truly exciting to our just transition framework. I'm gonna just gloss over this slide because it's basically saying like land is at the center of our struggles. And I think many of us know that, and I believe TraeAnna and Rosalinda will speak to this. But moving quickly, just the last 2 slides. We need to not only control the story, we are the creators. We shouldn't just be the consumers. And the point around if it's not soulful, it's not strategic, is simply, if it doesn't speak to our ancestry, if it's not based on our culture of sacredness and caring, if folks don't see themselves in it and uplifted by it, our organizing strategy will not win. We need to see our organizing not as a burden, but as a benefit, which brings me back to the build the new while stop the bad, right? We must meet our people's need for spiritual uplift. And there are so many beautiful ways to create story in this way, but it's just a reminder that that should be at the center. And then finally, we need capital to make this happen. We need to literally starve and stop what they're doing and feed and grow what we're doing. So having an organizing strategy that is really speaking to folks who control capital, but who are also antsy about the state of our world and say like, that land or that wealth that you own materially is stolen land and labor. So return it to the commons. And I'm excited that in the last 5-10 years, there's actually been tremendous movement. There's critical mass within sectors of philanthropy who are coming over to our politics. So it feels important to name that as part. And we don't need the 10 trillion that they have in the financial markets because it's all speculation. But if we can break off 5, 10, 20 billion over the course of the next years, it's game on for us. And these are just illustrations, but we can get to that later if time permits, of just how that capital is being deployed in a non-extractive fashion. We've built many financial vehicles to take control of this wealth and govern it in the commons. So I'll land with, I love this quote. Che Guevara said, "Be realistic, demand the impossible. Let us not let them tell us what is and isn't politically feasible. We don't know if something is feasible until we try it." And again, that's where I'm just excited to hear the stories that are about to come, because there are many examples of, they tell us we can't. Maybe we try the first time, it doesn't work, but then the second, third time it works, and suddenly it has become feasible. And if we tell our kindergartners and first graders to share and care, the least we can do is hold each other accountable to the same premises. So thank you, familia. I will stop my share. And again, appreciation for y'all letting me go kind of fast. And I'll pass it over back to Derek and Rosalinda and TraeAnna.
So much, Mateo. That was incredible and amazing what you got in that time frame. So thank you. And I had to tell Mateo not to put in all the examples, not because we don't want them, and he's got a lot of them, but because, you know, all of the people in the room have examples, and that's the point of us coming here today, is to share about the work we're doing aligned with this idea. And to start us off, we wanted to at least call a couple folks to the stage who are doing this work, we believe, to talk about what it looks like. And we'd like to start with Rosalinda to talk about, you know, what that looks like, especially outside the cities. And the experience for some of us can be invisible. But Rosalinda, if you'd talk a little bit about your work in alignment with these just transition ideas and how you implement just transition in your work.
I thank you so much, Mateo, for the way that you expressed the just transition framework. And I want to say that our organization is rooted in the food sovereignty movement and in food production. That's in our souls and in our heart. And I think Farmworker's visions are there, but we are also caged within a corporate industrialized agricultural system that exists, especially in the state of Washington and across the country, for profit. And, you know, based on that, our communities, farmworker communities, are a disposable labor force that is being used to its max. I mean, and the fact that the lifespan of a farm worker in the United States is 49 is the clear reason why the just transition framework is so important to us. Because of that, because of the power, not just in money, but in political power that the industrial agricultural industry has across the country, it is really difficult to organize in farm worker communities in rural areas, especially where the politics is so conservative, the industry is so strong, and the poverty of our families is so clear and obvious for our communities. This whole idea of the just transition for us, we've been building for 18 years now. And for us, the best, as farm workers, the best example that we saw was actually in Brazil in the landless people's movement, in their huge numbers of worker-owned cooperatives, in the production of food, in the way that the workers themselves saw food should be produced, and in valuing and protecting Mother Earth at every single level. I just want to say that when we talk to farm workers, they literally say that growing food is life. That to them, they express life in their ability to be able to grow good, healthy food for people. And it's the same message my father always gave me, that working on the land and growing food for other people to eat was a sacred task, not labor, but a sacred task that we had because we're farm workers for generations all the way into Mexico. So for us, the just transition framework does include defending farm worker rights, protecting farm workers from the exposure to toxic chemicals and exploitation and poverty, but also creating the way that we should be working. And we do that through worker-owned cooperatives and owning our own land. And for the first time, I think, well, no, it's not. For the first time, community to community actually has 65 acres with a farm worker-owned cooperative growing product, berries and vegetables, and living on the land. And we're in the beginning stages of developing this, what we call community farms, the way that it should be, food should be grown where the worker owners live on the land, produce the land, food for themselves, but also to be able to sustain themselves economically. And within the process of creating this cooperative, which is called appropriately Tierra y Libertad, other farm workers have been observing our progress because it was hard for them to believe we could actually do that. But now the farm is beginning to flourish. It is solar powered. We're beginning to have it be self-sustainable. We're in the process of having the dialogues on building the farm worker owned housing on the land and also the production of the products that they're going to sell. So, and sustain themselves. I think that the having farm workers actually go on the land and meet with the worker owners and observe the way that farm work is done has been inspirational to other farm workers, and they're now beginning to believe that it's possible. So now they're coming to us and saying, how do we do this? We don't talk about the just transition framework yet, but we behave in that manner and we present the solutions in the just transition framework. The protecting the land, protecting the water, self-determination, self-governance on the farm itself. Like the farm workers decide what products they're going to grow and sell. For example, there's been a shift in the marketing of the co-op this last season where the farm worker owners decided we're going to go products that our community will buy, not focus on what the markets in town want, although we will sell some of that because we need to make money. But our market is our people, our communities. And most of those communities are indigenous farm worker families and immigrant families from Oaxaca, Guatemala, Venezuela, and they're asking for very specific products. So I just want to say that they're selling cactus and they're selling other different types of chiles and tomatoes that they can't get anywhere else, plus raising chickens, goats, and all of that product is just leaving the farm as quickly as they produce it. And it's the perfect local economy that we're creating ourselves. So this is how we look at it. And this has been the toughest part. The defense is clear. The exploitation is clear. The poverty is clear. But the what do you want is what we're creating. And I think that that's the toughest part. And yes, we need capital because we've had, prior to Tierra Libertad, we had 5 worker-owned cooperatives by farm workers that failed because we could not raise the capital to sustain them to keep going. And that was a very heartbreaking, disheartening efforts, right? But now we're finally moving to that level thanks to all of the cooperation and the support and solidarity we're experiencing from other organizations. And I just want to end my part of this comment by saying that brothers and sisters listening today, y compañeros y compañeras, this summit is part of the just transition framework building. The fact that we've got, what did Aurora say, 85 people here listening to this and interested in this is a movement forward in the progress in developing a just transition framework. It's growing, and more of us that are undoing our capitalist, removing the bars from our capitalist cage in our minds is what's going to help to build this just transition framework. So I want to congratulate everybody that's here because this is important. And this is part of the just transition framework building. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rosalinda, for making that so real and for moving us forward in this movement. Grateful to you. And TraeAnna, I just feel from, watching, you are involved in so many of these strategies, from, building the new models to changing the story and the various dimensions of your work. From your angle, what resonated from you in this framework, and where do you see it in your work? Are there examples you'd like to share?
Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you, Jaguna. Thank you, Shiho, everyone I know that allowed me to be here. Amazing, Mateo and Rosalinda. Thank you guys so much. What an honor to be able to speak alongside you all. I'm so inspired by this work, and those that know me know this. The minute that I was studying, at UW Tacoma, urban studies, they were showing us zero waste models and how they were already working in, countries like Germany and other places. And immediately as a young student, I thought, well, this is what we need to be doing here. And I'm so grateful that I have the honor and the pleasure of working in organizations like Africatown Community Land Trust and King County Equity Now that really embody so much of what Just Transition is all about. When you talk specifically about self-governance and us understanding that we are already the solution makers we seek, we are the change makers we seek, we're the leaders we seek, embodying those principles and that spirit and that strategy in terms of how we pull ourselves together is so important. And one of the main things that really speaks volumes to me and into my work is the power of collectivism. And you guys both spoke to it. When I think about the Black Panther Party, I think about the collective. I think about everybody buying into something to say, now is the time for us to do something different, to show them that we're going to be responsible and that we're going to move forward in a way that's going to be best for us. At King County Equity Now, our pillars are about eliminating the wealth divide and elevating material conditions for Black families. And the way that we have to do this is by changing policy. We have to also advocate for all of the amazing organizations that are doing the work on the ground. So when I think about the fact that in our first year, we've been able to hold, different campaigns that are really showcasing the work of these amazing organizations, but they're engaging community members. They're engaging the people, again, in terms of building and wielding and actualizing and activating that collective power. We've had over 200,000 different actions, meaning we've had folks email their elected officials, pressing for very specific measures around progress. And through that, we've been able to get a lot of different money into projects. That's what we're talking about when we talk about moving the money and what it looks like. But we have to put that pressure on in a collective way. And so I'm excited because some of the wins that we've seen in our first year are really phenomenal, but it's because people cared enough to click some buttons and make sure their elected officials heard from them in terms of what was necessary. We can be a vehicle at King County Equity Now, a vehicle for groups like Africatown, like Wanawari, like Choose 180, like Nurturing Roots Farm, like ECS, right? That are looking to build community centers for their places, looking to build farms and have them sustainable, looking to create new ways around disrupting gun violence. All of these things are really important when we think about the beauty of the solutions that are being wielded in community and from a culturally responsive approach and a community-led driven aesthetic. One of the things that I love so much is that people understand they can do something. And I got so inspired by both you, Mateo, and Rosalinda, because you guys are showcasing what that means. Mateo, just as you were speaking, I was sitting there thinking, yes, this is exactly what I'm always talking about. And I know Jaguna and Shiho and Derek have heard it from me many a times, because we can idealize and be in an ideation phase often about what this looks like. But then you have to move it into action. And so at King County Equity Now, we've been able to press, an antiquated system like Washington Housing Finance Commission, WashFIC, and get them to understand that, hey, we looked over your books. You guys didn't have any money dedicated toward Black-led development projects in the city of Seattle. And yet there were so many that they could have been funding. And through that pressure, through people pressing on again and emailing WashFIC, they said, okay, we realize that we have to do something about this. And almost $200 million is coming into Black-led development projects because of action like that. It's things like that that get me really excited when I start to understand, when we talk about how we can literally combine the age we're in right now, this technological era, and utilize the tools of digitization that really make the globe available to us. How do we do that in a way that's responsive to the people in our very communities? And we're really doing that with our own quorum campaigns, making it easy again for people to be engaged and participate. All of us saw in 2020 how there was so much energy after the horrendous murder of George Floyd. I think people finally got to a breaking point of realizing that in order for us to change the country that we live in and to change our neighborhoods, I got to step out of my comfort zone. I can no longer just be okay going to work, going home, caring for my family, and being individualistic. It is the collective nature that's going to get us to and through the just transitions we seek. And that's why I get excited, because as we bring the information to people, my role is really about making it entertaining, but also educational. So I always say I'm producing edutainment for people because we want them to understand this is something they should care about, not just because it's for the betterment of them or their futures, but because collectively, all of us caring in a big old caring pot, we actually see the change that we've been saying would never happen. When we think about those things that seem impossible, collectively, they're not impossible. And I agree 100%. When it comes to showcasing what it looks like, we have to do it one thing at a time for now. And I always say I'm working within the system while building a new system, while tearing down a system without becoming a part of a system. Those are like my 4 pillars I'm always echoing to my children, to my community, to my friends and family. I'm always saying those 4 things because I understand that that is the paradigm we're in right now. We have to be able to do the policy and advocacy work in the existing systems and framework that is there. But we also have to challenge that because as we challenge it, we produce new ways of doing things. Just this last legislative session, we were able to see how digitization brought out so much more in terms of how these guys, these representatives, these state reps, everybody was able to listen to regular community members that normally would not be able to get on the bus or drive all the way down to Olympia, take a day off of work just to speak to somebody for 2 to 5 minutes. Ultimately, they said, wait a minute, there's something here with us opening it up on Zoom and using digitization as a way to bring people into the process. And that's what our elected officials are there to do. We are the constituents. So I always want to encourage and empower people to understand that, hey, one win after another, we're seeing wins because people are caring. We're seeing wins because people are finally waking up to the fact that when we think about having something new and creating something different than what we're so used to, and actually allowing America to atone for the atrocities of its past, that means that we all have to be pouring in. We all have to be clicking buttons, holding holding elected officials accountable, holding those who wield power, whether they're elected or not. We have to be holding them accountable, but we do that together. And I'm thankful because now we have Black-led projects in Seattle that are being funded. We have finally, after 5 or 6 years of working in silos with the mayor to try to get one fire station transferred into community ownership, it took nothing once the people heard about this story and they got on it immediately. That its sense of solidarity came to bear, and Mayor Durkin said, okay, enough is enough, and signed the papers. And so now we are creating the Innovation Center that is William Gross Center for Innovation. And I'm excited because as I see the background of all of this and we understand all of the layers, the bureaucratic layers that we as community members have to dive through and dig through and wield through, now we're getting there faster with this collective effort and power. And I'm always inspired by the work of the history of those who have revolted, those who have said, I'm not going to accept this. Because if we all just accepted it, things would continue the way they are. And I agree with Rosalinda. I think exactly this is a part of a just transition by bringing people together to will collective power, to change the things that they want to see changed in their lives. And ultimately, it is going to mean that all of us are elevating our material conditions and we're all elevating together. So I'm so grateful and humbled and honored to be a part of this work. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, TraeAnna, for inspiring and edutaining us with your work. It's really inspiring. And as we've heard it, like a couple examples from Washington, I just want to flag, we're going to get in and really want to hear from all of you in our next exercise, which is really going to tap the collective wisdom that TraeAnna was talking about that is in this group right here together. But we also want to hear how what's happening in Washington is part of a bigger movement, and wanted to circle back to Mateo to talk about how he sees this going from the local to this global change that we know we need.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you once again, TraeAnna, Rosalinda. This is gonna give me so much energy for this, for the remainder of this month. It's such an honor. Your question is an excellent one, Derek, because I think one of the things we get asked a lot as organizers, especially by those that that oppose our efforts, is like, well, how are you going to scale this up? And they're alluding to like, well, the scale of the problem merits a similar scale and solution, and are wanting to think in that too big to fail mentality. Whereas I think what is at the core of the Just Transition framework is we need to have 1,500 blooming solutions that are synchronized and strategically aligned. So what is so special about the work that we're building together is, I think, whether it's in Buffalo or Puerto Rico or Louisiana, as we all think, like, what are we stopping here and how are we building anew? And how are, I forget what that story is about, the small folks that take down that giant with many ropes. That's kind of what we're doing, right? We kind of have to figure out the jujitsu moves in each community, but strategically aligned to really disrupt the machinery of this, suicidal system. So in that sense, I think to your question, Derek, I actually want to read a quote, and it's a statement by Arturo Masol de Ya, and he is a co-leader of an organization called Casa Pueblo, which is in a town called Adjuntas in the heart of Puerto Rico. And they've been doing amazing work for 30 plus years. They were fighting open pit mines because they kind of are literally at the highest point of the island of Puerto Rico. And if these mines had taken hold, basically the whole watershed of the whole island, main island of Puerto Rico, would have been polluted. And they succeeded. And they actually created a whole thing called El Bosque del Pueblo, the People's Forest. It's locally governed. It's not governed by the state. It's governed by the peoples of the place. And they have all these amazing programs for children. It's unbelievable, regenerating, but I digress. They created a whole project around solarizing Adjuntas. And for a while, a lot of their neighbors were like, okay, this is interesting, but I can't relate. And then Hurricane Maria hit. As we know, FEMA is dysfunctional, didn't even show up there for a month. But suddenly there was this collectivized system of solar power where folks could plug in dialysis machines, find refrigeration for their medicines. Casa Pueblo is very collectivized. And suddenly this concept of solar bloomed in Puerto Rico thanks to them. So Arturo said, energy is the capacity to do work. We don't enjoy the wealth made from our work. One way to decolonize Puerto Rico is in practical terms, create energy independence. We can be producers, not consumers. We don't need coal and gas. We have sun and wind. In 2010, we were defending ourselves from a pipeline. They defeated that. Now we're on the offensive. Now we are the threat. We're calling for an energy insurrection. We're not going to wait for the government. We're going to unplug ourselves. I share this quote because what Arturo is saying is the point isn't solar. It's about who produces, distributes, and controls energy. The point is governance. And that's what Rosalinda, I think I want to land it and connect it. The example Rosalinda was giving, and please correct me if I'm misrepresenting, but one of the beauties of Tierra y Libertad, the way that governance is being practiced, Tierra y Libertad as a worker-owned collective is not only saying we are now a sanctuary zone free from ICE, they've organized their white neighbors to pledge to do the same thing. So are creating a whole new form of localized governance. And I can't, like, the level of white supremacy I know exists in rural Washington and rural Oregon is so extreme that level of new governance is revolutionary in my view. So, and that is happening in dozens of places. And I have the honor of doing work with folks in Buffalo often. And often they're doing incredible stuff around land trusts at tremendous scale. But I speak to folks in Buffalo and they're so immersed in their work that the self-criticism is alive, because I think that happens to all of us, and lose sight of how revolutionary their work is. So maybe that's the note I want to end in is there is so much inspiration we as movement generation, and by extent the Climate Justice Alliance, take from the innovations that are happening in Washington. So I invite you to wear that revolutionary pride on your sleeves, because amidst all of the contradictions, the incredible innovation is being watched very closely. Like Tierra y Libertad is an inspiration for hundreds of organizers trying to emulate, as Rosalinda said, what is happening. The land trust, that's a Black-led land trust in the heart of the Amazon Evo, is an incredible innovation. So that's, I think, what I want to say, like, folks are watching very attentively and trying to recreate those models. So let's keep on learning from each other and recreating and kind of rewriting the song on our terms, because it's a popular, exciting set of songs that we all need to be singing together. Gracias, Derek.